It is rarely met with, even 100,000 billion papas, having to see and listen to, remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
A couple weeks ago, I had a topic all set to talk about this week. And then last weekend, when we changed our clocks for daylight savings time, I thought, well, spring's got to be coming up. I want to make sure I check to see when the first day of spring was. And it turns out that it's today at 10:33 a.m. So it's almost right the exact time that we're here. So then I said, since it coincided perfectly with that, I decided to change my talk and want to talk a little bit about spring. So, and it's easy for me to talk about this, I think, because every year at this time, I think back to a book that I read many years ago. It sort of coincided with the same time that I started practicing Zen. And the name of the book was Let Your Life Speak. And the author is a guy named Parker Palmer. And in the book, he draws a comparison between the repetitive flow of the seasons and the flow of our lives. How our lives can progress through cycles of rebirth, flourishing, decay, and death or dormancy. And there are similar teachings from the Zen tradition. Parker Palmer suggests that our modern world has fostered the attitude that we make or manufacture our lives. We look at our lives in a mechanistic way. The backdrop that this attitude is set within is the backdrop of economic progress, technology, and that of classical science, being that the universe operates like a machine according to laws in ways that we can predict if we understand the laws. An alternative to the mechanistic attitude is provided by looking at our lives within the backdrop of the flow of the seasons. If we look at our lives within this backdrop, this fosters the attitude that our lives grow or evolve in an organic way. An organic attitude implies that our lives grow through a cyclical pattern that will naturally include times of comfort and ease, and also times of difficulty and challenge. Accepting this type of organic, cyclical flow can help us weather through the tough times with equanimity and through the easy, good times with humility. So here's an excerpt from Parker Palmer's book. He says, "The master metaphor of our era does not come from agriculture. It comes from manufacturing. We do not believe that we grow our lives. We believe that we make them. From an early age, we absorb our culture's arrogant conviction that we manufacture everything. Transformation is difficult, so it is good to know that there is comfort as well as challenge in the metaphor of life as a cycle of seasons." That's the end of the excerpt. Dogen Zenji wrote short poems about the seasons. Here's one of the poems that speaks to all four seasons. Spring, flowers. Summer, cuckoos. Autumn, the moon. Winter, snow does not melt. All seasons pure and bright. This poem expresses the variations of the seasons and how these variations are perfect both in themselves and perfect in the way they integrate together into one total reality. If we apply this metaphor to our lives, accepting that going through cycles of rebirth, flourishing, decay, and death are part of the natural flow, it teaches us and helps us to give each day our wholehearted effort, and that each day, even the difficult ones, contributes to the overall growth and flourishing of our lives, even though we may not be able to see exactly where we are being led while we are buried in the weeds of the day. The specific thing I like about Parker Palmer's book that always makes me think about it in spring is his description of spring. He says the spring season is really like two seasons in one. The first part is the transition out of winter. This is a transition out of rest, out of quiet dormancy, or out of that which is happening underground in the dark. The second part is the transition into summer, a transition into the light above ground, a flourishing and almost crazy flamboyance. With regards to the first half of spring, Parker Palmer says, before spring becomes beautiful, it is plug ugly, nothing but mud and muck. But in the muddy mess, the conditions for rebirth are being created. And Dogen has this poem about the first half of spring. Although it is snowing ceaselessly at the gate of the mountain valley, the warbler is singing. Spring has already come. Applying these early spring descriptions as metaphors for our lives, ugly, muddy, mucky, and snowing, describe times when our vision is not clear. We can't see very far ahead. Things are swirling around. It's hard to find any light, and what we do see is not what we would necessarily like to see. And in order to get through times like this, it takes a lot of effort just to go a short distance, like walking through thick mud or deep snow. I assume that we've all gone through times like this. These are the early spring moments in our lives. And if we accept the example from nature, we realize we will go through these early spring periods routinely as long as we live. It's not as if you go through it once and it's over. But notice that Parker Palmer says that in the muddy mess, the conditions for rebirth are being created. And Dogen says that even though it is snowing ceaselessly in the mountain valley, the warbler is singing. Parker Palmer goes on to say, early spring teaches us to look more carefully for the green stems of possibility, for the intuitive hunch that may turn into a larger insight. These teachings are telling us that in those muddy, mucky periods, there's something that is beginning to grow. And I think a significant characteristic of what is beginning to grow is that most likely it will be something we are not expecting. And as a result, we may not see it or recognize it. We may be too wrapped up in our emotions, trying too hard, and thinking too much to see the warbler in the snow. There's an emphasis in the Zen tradition to stop thinking so much and rather just look. And to take that one step further, when we look, we have to make sure we are looking with a beginner's mind. We can't have any preconceived notion of what we are looking for, because that will limit our vision immediately. There's a phrase that I heard a while back, and I think I might have mentioned it before, but it said, what you focus on determines what you miss. So this results in the following paradox. You get what you are looking for, but only when you stop looking for it. And what you get may not be exactly what you thought you were after in the beginning. It will be what you were really looking for, but didn't know you were looking for. So in the muddy, mucky, early spring moments in our lives, we have to keep our eyes open and look with a beginner's mind for the unexpected green stems of possibility. So I want to read Dogen's poem again. Although it is snowing ceaselessly at the gate of the mountain valley, the warbler is singing, spring has already come. Another teaching that comes from this poem is that even though each season is individually complete and perfect, the seasons are also interwoven, and there are elements of each season within each season. In this poem, winter is still present through the ceaseless snowing, but spring is present too with the singing warbler. To give an example of how to apply this metaphor to our lives, this is how I apply it to my life. I'm 63 years old, so in terms of my chronological lifespan, I think of this aspect of my life as being in autumn, maybe even late autumn. I retired from a 30-plus corporate career a little over 4 years ago. That aspect of my life I look at as being in winter. Sometimes I think of it as being dead because I have no plans to do that kind of work again. But based on my experience, I tell myself that I should rather think of it as being dormant because we never know what life may present with us in the future. Maybe something will come up at some point down the road that would ask me to resurrect some of those skills. So I'm in autumn with regards to my age and in winter with regards to my traditional career. But doing this kind of stuff, like giving a Dharma talk, being a Zen priest, conducting services, with regards to this aspect of my life, I think of myself as maybe being in late springtime, maybe finally transitioning into early summer. There's still a lot of newness in this. I'm still in the process of growing, and I've gone through muddy and mucky moments when I've questioned whether this is the right response to the question being asked of me, my life. So there's my example of how spring, autumn, and winter are interwoven together to create the complete fabric of my life. And I said this before, I share personal examples with the intent of not talking about me, but with the intent that maybe it can trigger a similar application in your own lives with your own specific details. So that's the first half of spring. Then moving on to the second half of spring, partners, here's another excerpt from Parker Palmer. Perhaps we are meant to yield to the flamboyance of late spring, to understand that life is not always to be measured and meted as winter compels us to do, but to be spent from time to time in a riot of color and growth. Another paradox known in all the wisdom traditions is if you receive a gift, you keep it alive not by clinging to it, but by passing it on. Nature teaches a steady lesson. If we want to save our lives, we cannot cling to them, but must spend them with abandon. When we are obsessed with bottom lines and productivity, with efficiency of time and motion, with the rational relation of means and ends, with projecting reasonable goals and making a beeline toward them, it seems unlikely that our work will ever bear full fruit, unlikely that we will ever know the fullness of spring in our lives. Dogen associates flowers as the symbol for spring. His poem about late spring reads, "It seems that the mountain spring wind has begun to blow. On the peaks and in the valleys, myriad flowers are shining." So one of the things I like about spring is being able to finally open the windows in my house after they've been closed during the winter. And every once in a while, there's this perfect, soft, fragrant breeze that blows in. This is my mountain spring wind. It doesn't blow like this all the time. It's just sort of a puff that comes every once in a while and is gone almost as quickly as it came. In its softness and fragrance, it gives comfort, but in its quick disappearance, it's a reminder of impermanence. I look at this mountain spring wind as communicating that there is comfort in accepting impermanence. Maybe this is similar to Jesus saying, "Do not be afraid," in the language of nature. Or maybe it's the voice of God speaking in the wind as he did to Elijah. In response to the mountain spring wind, the myriad flowers are shining. The mountain spring wind can be thought of as a metaphor for experiences we have which elicit a deep, intuitive, felt sense of truth. This feeling may be something that we can't necessarily understand or explain to ourselves using our normal mental processes, but yet we can feel our bodies resonate with it. If we can realize and respond to this experience with acceptance, then our life will shine like the myriad flowers in the mountain peaks and valleys. Flowers are a common symbol and metaphor in Zen literature. Bodhidharma had the following poem. One flower opens with 5 petals, forming a fruit, which ripens of its own accord. One way of interpreting this poem suggests that each one of us is one flower, and many beautiful petals can emerge from each one of our lives. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke has a line in one of his poems that says, "Be modest now, like a thing ripened until it is real." Aristotle described the ideal life as one that is flourishing. These images of flowers blooming and fruits ripening seem to be common expressions of the potentials within all of us. I think these are very inspirational images to keep in mind, and in the second half of spring, nature provides this inspiration to us almost everywhere we look. Spring and fall are my 2 favorite seasons. They have the most beautiful colors, fragrances, and freshness of the wind. I've noted to myself that these are the 2 transitional seasons, moving between winter and summer. Nature seems to manifest the most beauty in the transitions. Is there a teaching for our lives in that? When we are going through a transition period, a wide range of experiences and emotions bombard us, from fear and anxiety to hope and excitement. We may be overwhelmed. Can we look at nature as a teacher to help us through these times? Just as there is so much beauty in the transitions of spring and fall, can we see the beauty in the life transition we are going through? Can we look at all the new experiences and emotions as the flamboyant colors and fragrances of spring? Can we roll with them with hopeful abandon? We see and accept how beautiful these things are in nature. Can we do the same with the events in our lives? Going back to what I mentioned at the beginning of viewing our lives in an organic rather than a mechanistic way, we understand that for flowers to grow and fruits to ripen, the proper conditions must exist. In order for the flower of our lives to open with petals and for the fruits to ripen, we have to cultivate our lives just like farmers have to cultivate their fields. Dogen has another line that says, "A single straight road, the continuity of thoroughgoing practice, results in its blossoming flower." The flower doesn't bloom without some sort of consistent effort. And Marie Wilke's line, "Be modest now, like a thing ripened until it is real," suggests there is a time element involved in ripening and becoming real, and a time element that will in most cases be unknown to us and not in our control. So if we really want the flower of our life to open with 5 petals and produce ripened fruit, we have to have some type of a consistent, cultivated practice. And since the time element is unknown to us, we just simply have to continue with faith and the virtue of patience. We can't put a time limit on how long early or late spring moments last in our lives. That is dependent by the larger flow of life. Just like a farmer can't control the weather, but has to continue working within it and adjust appropriately to whatever weather presents itself, so do we have to continue our practice through whatever life presents to us. In the first half of spring, I mentioned that we have to keep our eyes open and look with a beginner's mind for the green stems of possibility that may be growing, and that these green stems may be things that we never previously thought of. In a similar manner, in the second half of spring, petals that emerge from the flower of our lives can appear without us being consciously aware of them. Paraphrasing something Dogen says in Genjo Koan, he says, when we awaken, we don't need to perceive we are awakened, but nonetheless, we manifest awakening. We don't concern ourselves with trying to bring forth or identify petals from our lives. Rather, we just continue practicing, settling ourselves into the reality we have before us, and responding according to the intuitive wisdom we feel. Petals will then just emerge on their own, but we don't think, oh, look at the petal that has emerged from me. This thought won't come up. There's just a petal that has emerged on its own. So if our roots are strong and continue to be nourished, petals can continue to appear throughout our lives, no matter how old we are. The petals that may emerge when we are 25 years old, however, will be different than the petals that emerge when we're 80. That's the way it should be. And all of us individual flowers, with our petals, should feed back and interact with each other in harmony, just like the various flowers in a mountain meadow. And there should be mutual respect among all the flowers for the various petals each provides. Respect and appreciation for the younger flowers for their energy, strength, enthusiasm, and innovation. And respect and appreciation for the older flowers for their experience, guidance, and stability. All of us flowers exist in the universal garden of perfect wisdom, and nature in spring shows us how beautiful blooming together in harmony can be.
Page 12 or 19 online. May the
Narratives penetrating to each thing in all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha way. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are